So how did you become this fighting force against the pseudoscience? And when did you leave academia and so on? Like what happened?
When I was at university, when I was, a grad student and a postdoc, and I had colleagues that were saying things like, "Oh, there's five sexes in humans," or "Sex is a social construct or a spectrum." Um, I just took those claims the same way I took other claims relating to intelligent design and ghosts and things like that. Like, oh, there's just they're wrong about this one particular thing, and I understood the biology. Let me correct them on this type of thing. But I guess I should have been more aware of the social surroundings because the people I was criticizing before were, sort of right-wing Christian evangelical types, and they didn't have a big foothold in academia. But when I started criticizing like my own colleagues for what I saw was just the same type of pseudoscience, that had a big backlash. So I for a while, this was a little before 2020, and I was sorry, this is before like 2018. I was keeping below the radar. I was trying to get jobs as a professor. I was applying for, every single professor job I could in the United States and Canada. And I got really fed up because James Lindsay, Pluckrose, and Bogosian, they did a big sort of sting operation where they hoaxed a lot of these gender studies journals and published complete nonsense in them and exposed them to be frauds. Nature had published an article about why sex is a spectrum. Scientific American did the same thing. And it just sort of came to a head where I was like, this is insane. This isn't just a fringe internet community that's, saying stuff that's wrong on the internet. Like, this is pretty mainstream. So I wrote an article for Quillette called The New Evolution Deniers, where I laid out my problems with the sex denialism. That kind of blew up, in a good way, but then a lot of people, my colleagues especially, thought it was, transphobic or whatever. So I thought it was really weird. That's why, because I wanted to be a scientist, because I wanted to be able to challenge certain ideas. I didn't become a scientist so I could just cower and be silent on things. So I just kept writing articles about it, what sex is, why it's not a spectrum, etc. So that pretty much lit my entire academic career on fire. But it sort of sparked a new one of science popularizing outside of it and sort of this, criticizing the gender ideology and the sex denialism and sort of an anti, wokeism in general. That's what I kind of do right now. I criticize a lot of woke ideologies.
Yeah. Do you think at this point, do you think that is it even possible to become a biologist or a professor in that field without believing in this stuff?
You can fake it. You can um,
No, no,
be
no.
quiet.
Without saying it out loud, without faking it. Just
So you have to signal to some degree that you believe it. At least in because most universities now they require like a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. You need to write like a maximally woke DEI statement to get even an interview at most of the big colleges or probably most any colleges in the wake of the George Floyd stuff. So you do kind of have to lie, and that was a big problem with me because I wrote my own DEI statement because maybe a third of the universities required it when I was applying, and this was before George Floyd. Um, and I sent it to some colleagues, and they said that they liked it, but that this wasn't the type of statement that would ever even approach getting me a job in the U.S. and Canada. Just because it's really tough. I don't want to say it's impossible, but you're really swimming against the current if you're trying to do that. But people with tenure, they need to speak up because they're the only ones who can right now. It's much harder to get a job in academia right now than it is to maintain one if you already have one. Like you can
uh,
speak a little bit more if you're tenured and you have the job. So those people need to speak up because they're that's the whole point of having tenure. If you're not going to speak up when you have tenure, then tenure is wasted on you essentially, in my
yeah,
opinion.
like if you're not discussing ideas and you're not attacking ideas from every possible angle, then you're not a scientist. You're just a memory holder. Like you're just remembering things and saying them. Like I don't know.